I gotta say, I really love the little skit that he does here. Very playful, closing his eyes not to know which journalist from the crowd he is picking, totally at random. So let's hear what he has to say.
Mr. President, Democratic Congresswoman Abigail Spanberger said of your presidency this week, nobody elected him to be FDR, they elected him to be normal and stop the chaos. How do you view your mandate after Tuesday's election losses for Democrats, and is she wrong?
Well, Abigail's a friend. We had a long talk. She joked and said, and I have a picture, she said, I have a picture of Roosevelt hanging in my office, her office, okay? I don't intend to be anybody but Joe Biden. That's who I am. And what I'm trying to do is do the things that I ran on to do. And look, people out there are ordinary, hardworking Americans, are really, really been put through the ringer the last couple years, starting with COVID. COVID has disrupted almost every family one way or another, whether it's wearing a mask or losing a family member.
Now, I gotta make a small interjection here, and while it's true that, yes, some families were disrupted because of the loss of their loved ones, and that is because of the virus, many other things are because of the government. For example, I know people who lost their jobs. I know people who are struggling because of the inflation. I know people who might end up homeless, and probably some of you know people who did end up homeless. And that has nothing to do with the virus. That has 100% to do with the government regulations. My favorite one is when they put the CDC moratorium so that if you had a person living in your house and he didn't pay rent, you couldn't kick them out because, well, it's a pandemic. So, okay, fine. But then you look at the banks and they could kick people out if they didn't pay their mortgage. How is that fair? How is that following the science? Did someone make a scientific method and figure out that people who are kicked in the streets by the banks are less likely to suffer from the pandemic compared to the people that are kicked out because of their landlords? Because they couldn't pay the rent? How are these people different, scientifically speaking? The inflation. Also, the government's doing. The government deciding your business is not essential. Their business is. By the way, the mainstream media is essential. Now I understand like people need to get their news, but why was comedy night essential? Why is a restaurant operating at 30% capacity, but the mainstream media is operating at 100% capacity? And this was last year. Right? So I just want to get it into people's heads that while the virus is deadly, it is not omnipotent. It is not having supernatural attributes. The politicians are the ones that decided which measures to take. And the politicians should be held to account at the next election.
And so people are worried. People are also worried about, coming up, they don't, understandably. Why is the price of agricultural products, when I go to the store, why is it higher? Like, for example, if we were all going out and having lunch together and I said, let's ask whoever's in the next table, no matter what restaurant we're in, have them explain the supply chain to us. Think they'd understand what we're talking about? They're smart people. But supply chain. Well, why is everything backed up? Well, it's backed up because the people who supply the materials that end up being on our kitchen table or in our life, guess what? They're closed those plants because they have COVID.
See what they are doing? These politicians, man, unreal. Is there any example, any whatsoever, from the entire world where a plant was closed down because too many of their workers died from the virus? Any whatsoever? No? Do you know why they closed down? Because the government shut them down. Now you can make the argument that this was the right choice. You can make the argument that this was the best thing to do. But take responsibility, old man. Honestly, it's like when you get sick and there's different types of treatment. Like if you buy the expensive pills and then you don't have money to buy rent, it's not the sickness that made you not to buy rent, it's the pills that were expensive and you chose to buy. Now again, it's a decision. Like, okay, were these pills good for you? Were you happy with the decision? That's another conversation. But I really hate What I hear on television or when I hear people say as if the virus is supernatural and has the ability to shut down businesses and force people to do things. No, that's the politicians. And people need to know is the politicians, because if they're happy with the politicians, I mean, maybe they're happy with the politicians, then they should vote for them. If they're unhappy with the politicians, maybe they should vote for others. But I guess this is the problem, right? Like, the politicians understand that maybe some people aren't happy, so they don't want to make the connection. Now, I want to point something out, right? Because I actually made this video to defend Joe Biden, if you can believe it or not, right? A lot of people are saying that he is mocking Americans because they're not intelligent. Because, well, they don't know how the supply chain works. And I gotta say, he's absolutely right. And the reason he is absolutely right isn't because Americans aren't intelligent. Because there's some very intelligent people that I know who, if you were to ask them, how does electricity function, they'll probably tell you, well, it's that thing that comes from the walls, right? But they will probably know how to treat a stage 2 liver cancer. So intelligence doesn't really mean having knowledge. That's two different things. Having knowledge on how things work and being intelligent are not one and the same. You can have a person that's a rocket scientist and he doesn't know how to install Windows. Why? Because he doesn't have that knowledge. So who should give people the knowledge? I personally would think that this should happen in schools. If we still send kids to schools, it should be for a purpose. Like things that the parents might not be able to teach at home. And when you send someone to a school, maybe they should learn things like how to start a business, how to write a resume, how to figure out on how to get employed, how to manage to play on the stock market, how does the supply chain work, what is the economy, what is supply and demand, what is taxation, how much taxes you pay for, direct and indirect taxes, what is the sales tax. Like you would think these are essential things to have people informed so they can vote properly. And the question is, why aren't they being taught in schools? So you go to school and you learn your ABCs and your LGBTs and all of the other important stuff, and the history of the United States and the slavery and all of that. But can you learn how to start a business? No. Very interesting, isn't it? Now, another thing, and I kept saying this in many videos, and it should be a right-wing talking point, but for some reason it's not. A lot of Americans complain about student debt. Why? Because if you're 18 and you go to a bank and you say, I need a loan of $200,000. Normally they would laugh at you, but if you say, I needed to become a gender studies expert so I can be a master in homosexuality, queer studies, or whatever, they will be like, okay, sign here and sign here and sign here. Why do they do that? Because the government is going to pay in case you can't, but then the government is going to make sure that they're following you financially your entire life. So your entire life you're going to have to spend time to pay for that loan, which you made, and you went to a university where you can't find a job in because the market has way too many homosexual experts, which is a noble profession I keep mentioning. Very important. But there's only a limited number of people that can do it. And they can be integrated in the economy. So now you have people who are absolutely desperate and they're crippled by student debt. Why isn't the government also backing a loan if a person wants to start a business? Like, let's say someone wants to start a company now to make face masks, because it's very profitable, right? So you want to make a loan with 5 other of your colleagues in order to make face masks and start the building and do the manufacturing process. Well, you can't, can you? Right? So it's almost like there is an incentive for people to keep studying useless shit so that they don't learn the actual important things. And then you can have the US president pointing it out. It's like, well, how many people understand the supply chains? Like, it's magic. You know, it's the virus that causes inflation. It's the virus that causes the businesses to shut down. And people believe it. Because they don't know how things work. And it's absolutely correct. Yes, he is 100% right. And until people don't come up and demand that actual useful things are being taught in schools, nothing is going to change. And you're going to have an uneducated populace which is going to vote for whomever promises them more free shit. And then they're going to make Pikachu face when the prices are rising up, when the rich are being taxed their fair share, but the goods at the supermarkets go up, and they're Pikachu at your face. Because they don't understand. It's like, oh, but they tax the rich. Why am I having to pay an extra for the... And that's, pretty much what politics are like. And let me know what you guys think, and I'll see you in the comment section. Take care.